Hello, everyone. Kia ora and привет. My name is Anna. And let me start my talk from the short story of my life. So when I was a kid, I was positioning myself as a person who has logical and mathematical thinking. But somehow I landed in humanitarian university, so where I studied psychology, art, philosophy. And I was struggling so much for the first year until I realized how to apply actually the logical and mathematical thinking on something that from the first point of view and from the first perspective doesn't have anything similar with that at all. So when I started in UX, I was kind of looking to take the similar approach. And that's that's how I landed with this topic of how to measure the experience. So take a second and think, how many times did you use numbers today? Imagine the world without numbers. What would we do? How would we know how to get somewhere in time? How would we know how to pay for the food? How would we know how to cook and use the recipes without numbers? How would we know that the 42 is the meaning of life? So numbers are everywhere, and they're actually making our life so much easier. Yep. So measure twice and cut once. This is an expression you would hear if you take the wooden-working class. In Russia, we have similar expression, but slightly different. So we are saying measure 7 times and cut once. So probably Russian buildings are perfect. This is actually very good advice. The idea of preparation and action. Action without thinking usually leads to the disaster. It takes less time to prepare in advance than it does to fix the mistake after you make them. So there is a misconception that experience something unmeasurable. There are, however, multiple ways you can accurately evaluate that. So when I did my training in UX strategy, the first thing I've heard, and actually that shocked me, that it will be long to implement that, and it's going to be hard. But it's actually put me in the right direction and set the right expectations. So the similar message I want to pass it to you today. Yes, the path will be long and it's going to be hard, but just you need to take the baby steps, and eventually you will see the progress that will bring you to success. So when you're looking at the return on investment, it's better to look at the different aspects of this topic. Today, I want to highlight 3 of those aspects. So the first one, the return on investment of UX as a discipline in general. Second one, how to calculate return on investment. And the third one, where to start. So let's start from the first one, the return on investment of user experience. I've analyzed a bunch of reports and studies around this topic. And today I want to share some of them with you that I thought the most interesting, and the ones that you potentially can use as well. So the first study that had been done by PwC in 2018, and the study called Future of Customer Experience, and that's actually showed that nearly 1/3, which is 32% of consumers, would walk away from the brand they love after one single bad experience, and 59% after several bad experiences. In addition, the study found that the customers actually willing to pay 60% more for a better experience. So this study has been based on a B2C businesses, so probably B2B numbers will be slightly different, but still, that's really impressive UX impact. Another study I found that based on an IEEE worldwide report that's called Why Software Fails from 2005. And based on that report, it says that every $1 invested in UX brings $100 in return. where did they get these numbers. So apparently, 100 times more expensive to fix an error after development than fix that before the development. But it's, of course, always depends. So the idea usually based on then earlier on the software development life cycle you identified an issue, then cheaper it will be to fix that. So let's say you are somewhere in the wireframing stages. If you will find some issues with that, what do we usually do? So throwing the wireframes away and creating new ones. Imagine if the issue will be identified after the development, or when the thousands of clients are already using that. Imagine the impact of that and the cost of fixing this issue. So how do we measure the return on investment? The formula is actually quite simple. So you take in your full profit, you minus cost, dividing on the same cost, so how much you spent on that, and multiplying on 100. That somehow you will get the percentage of your return on investment. So as an example, let's take apples. Let's say you've got one apple, and you grow the tree from this apple. And the tree gave you 3 apples in return. Not a great tree, but still positive investment. So you're taking your profit, which was your 3 apples, minus 1 apple that you invested in a tree, and dividing on the same apple that you invested, multiplying by 100. So as a result, you got 200% in return, so twice more. How would you interpret this formula and the result? So positive return investment is a good return. The negative return investment is a bad return when cost more than revenue. But it always depends, of course. So it depends on the like how large your organization. So for the larger organizations, the more cost they have. So in general, for some of them, the good return is not necessarily a good return. So you need to actually bring 600% return investment, which is 6 times more. And sometimes, even if it looks positive, yes, that can be interpreted in a negative way. So I'm not talking about the small organization and the startups. It's a completely different story, but just the good figure to keep in mind. I was looking for a while to how to identify and calculate the business value. And luckily, I found a simple module that calls EYSIS Model. And based on that, so businesses are actually looking at 3 aspects of the return. So first one, they look at the increase in revenue. The second one, avoiding cost. And the third one, improve services. So let's look at them one by one in more details. So how would you identify the increased revenue? So usually you would look at the customer acquisition, so amount of customers you bring on board, or customers upsell, so how much upsell you give to your existing customers. So how would you calculate that? What techniques and methods would you use? So I would recommend use your user testing results or analytics. So with user testing, you can calculate the time on task, task completion, amount of errors, and productivity. And with analytics, you can look at the conversion rate, feature usage, frequency of return, and churn. Churn is the interesting one. So that's the rate of customers leaving. So you can say with the churn, by decreasing the churn, you bring more revenue to the customers because you save them, you got more revenue for the next year. You can say with the churn, you're actually saving costs because you already have them, and you save costs for the next year as well. Plus, the churn actually can be applied on increasing customer service, because the better service you have, then less churn you will have. As an example, so Bank of America, in 2004, they ran the project for redesigning and improving the enrollment for online banking. So as a primary success metrics, they defined the percentage of customers completing the process. As a strategy, they took the prototyping and testing various design solutions, but with keeping the success metrics in mind. As a result, the week the new registration form went live, the return of investment benchmark was not only met, that was actually doubled. So that was really unexpected, but amazing result. Let's look at the avoid cost. So with avoiding cost, usually you would look at your lower customer support or decreasing customer support or reducing the development time. And with both of them, I would recommend you to look at your internal logs. So you can look at the customer calls and emails, time on call, time on training, the amount of support tickets raised. With reducing development time, it can be a team velocity, it can be decreasing the team rework, or grooming session costs. You should be careful, though, with some of the metrics that actually can drive people behavior. I can give you an example from my experience. So a long time ago, for our call center, one of the KPIs being set was the time on call. So they should decrease the time on call. And the KPI was met so quickly and easily. Do you know how? So they were just dropping the phone call after a minute. Doesn't matter, did they satisfy the client, they didn't, no, just drop a phone call, done. But it's actually led to the completely opposite result. Definitely, like, nobody was satisfied with that approach. So just be careful with those KPIs and metrics that make sure that they're not driving the people's behavior. So as an example with avoid cost is a Virgin America project which they've done in 2014. So they've decided to create the first worldwide responsive airline website. And they actually chose two success metrics. One is they really wanted to increase the conversion rate and make the lower support calls. And as a strategy, they choose the A/B testing, so they A/B tested new designs against the old designs. And as a result, after 2 quarters of the responsive site being live, the performance goals were exceeded with 14% increase in conversion rate and 20% the fewer support calls. That was amazing results, I would say, and great numbers. And as overall, the passengers actually were booking almost twice as fast on any kind of device. So next, let's look at the improved service. So improved service, that's probably the hardest one to calculate. But if you would look at that in more details, it actually will lead you anyway to the avoiding cost or to increase your revenue. So mainly with improved services, you look at your customer retention. And with the customer retention, what can bring you to the increased revenue? It gives you a really good word of mouth that can bring you more customer acquisition, for example. So how to measure that? You can use different methods with mainly quantitative analysis with the surveys. So the most popular one, that's NPS, Net Promoter Score. You can use Google's HEART framework. If you haven't heard or haven't used that before, so just go and Google that. That's the pretty good one. System usability scale. It's really similar to the Net Promoter Score, but it's mainly focused on the usability. Example. As an example, I choose the app tech platform, that's called Pubmedic. In 2015, they're already quite mature organization, so they've been in the market for 7 years. But because there was a different technology used, different front-end developers were developing the interfaces, different designers. So after 7 years, the interface was fully inconsistent, and they have decided to fix that. So in 2015, they ran the project by unifying the UX design and make the brand consistent look and feel. So 3 approaches they took. The first one, they were looking at the information architecture and re-evaluating that. They created a UI style guides, and I build the design system. So it's quite classic approach if you want to have your brand consistent and continue having that consistent. And of course, they run multiple user testing iterations. So as a result, the NPS was increased from 6 to 9 when they are measured against the all platform satisfaction data. So their customers actually became from the detractors to the promoters. It's quite hard to even increase on one score, and here was a 3, so that was great success. So where would we start? So first, I want to talk a little bit on a strategic level. So where would you start from the strategy perspective? Definitely start from the vision and objectives of your organization and your company. What your company actually trying to achieve. As an example, with Google, or with Facebook, sorry. Google already was before. With the Facebook. So their goal that we will spend more time on their platform. Then more time is spent, then better for them. But with Transaction Services Group, we have opposite goal. So we actually want to take all admin time from the users and from our customers and do their job on the side that they can do something what they love. So for us, this metrics, we want to decrease the time spent on our system. So that's why it's really important to look at the vision and objectives of your organization first. Then just list all the measurements that you know, that you can think of, that you can find in internet. Just list them on the table. It doesn't matter do you have them implemented already or not. Then another column, think of what tools or techniques you need to use to measure that. Next, look at what's feasible to measure and what's smart to measure. With what's smart to measure, the visions and objectives coming here. So based on them, you will understand and recognize what's smart to measure. Then, when you will have that as overall, you will see a clear picture of what will be important to use and what the main important thing to implement first. And based on that metrics, just create an implementation plan to improve your metrics for the future. Let's take a step down and look at the tactics. So with the tactics, I want to talk about the first you see the feature coming, for example, or some improvements. First, the same approach with the strategy. Think of what's the goal, why we implemented this improvement or why we implemented this feature. Then look at your main representative audience, which is going to be your persona or personas. Identify the user top tasks and define the success metrics of those tasks or as overall of your project. And map it back to the UX metrics, to the KPIs that you identify first, to the goal of your improvement. And it's quite important, schedule the periodic checkpoints. So in my experience, if I wouldn't put something in my calendar, I can forget about that and just the things will slip away. So just set up the recurring sessions. It doesn't have to be long. It can be 15 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour. Depending on how long your project is, just it can be like once per month, just to have a checkpoint with your team. Are you on track? Are you still keeping in mind your success metrics? Are you still going towards the same goal? By the end of the project, compute your return on investment and communicate. Communication is the key. Always communicate. This is hard to measure something if you don't have a baseline. Always baseline your measurements by benchmarking against old version or competitors, or it can be industry standards. As I mentioned before, communication is really important. As a UXers, we need to tell the UX story to make it successful. Measurements of success will help you with that. So just build your case studies, give presentations to all your companies, bring the people on board, and make them to be a part of your success. This is very important. So what is the magic around numbers? Actually, the more specific you're communicating your numbers, then more credible you sound and less doubt you will get. So what does it mean? Let's look at those two sentences. So if I will say, this feature doubled our site usage. Or what if I will say, this feature increased the site usage by 97.5%? So which sentence you would believe more? When you're communicating your success and your numbers, try to use as much exact numbers as possible. When you're using exact numbers, that's clear that you know your stuff, and to challenge you, another person should feel very, very confident that they know their stuff too, and usually they don't. So as I said before, that it will be hard and that it will be long, but it's definitely worth the effort. All the great achievement starts from the baby steps. You just need to follow the worldwide methodology that's called GDI, which means just do it. This methodology actually called GFDI, but let's stick with the first one. So you just need to start. Thank you very much.